Hello everyone. My name is Sylvia Kessler. I'm 82 years old, and today, I am going to break my silence. Not because I want revenge. Not because I'm angry anymore. But because the weight of this secret has grown heavier than my bones can carry. Stay tuned. My story will leave you speechless. I sit in the sunroom of my modest retirement cottage in Shelby, North Carolina. The house smells like chamomile and dust, and the afternoon light is soft, golden, like the kind you see in old home videos. In my hands, I cradle a photograph. It's worn and curled at the edges, faded from years in a frame on the mantel. My son, Everett, grinning like he always did when he was 7. My daughter, June, holding his hand, only 9 but already mothering him. And me behind them, smiling but not really. You see, smiles lie. And mine was hiding something bigger than either of them could have imagined. For 30 years, I kept the truth buried deep. I let them believe in a version of their childhood that was safer, cleaner, kinder than what actually happened. Because I thought I was protecting them. I thought if I just stayed quiet, they could live better lives. I didn't want them to carry his sin, their father's sin. But silence doesn't keep a family whole. Sometimes silence rots it from the inside. Lately, Everett has stopped calling. June visits, but she seems distracted, distant. They don't know why I hesitate when they talk about their father. They don't understand why I never visit his grave. They think I'm just old, forgetful. But I remember everything. Every night. Every bruise not mine. Every threat. Every time I stood between him and them. And I can't pretend anymore. Tomorrow is Everett's birthday. They'll both be here. Sitting at this table. Smiling. And I'll be ready. Because I'm going to tell them everything. The truth. What really happened. And why I kept quiet for 3 decades. But once I open that door, I don't know if they'll ever look at me the same again. Will they thank me for protecting them? Or hate me for hiding it? One thing's for sure, after tomorrow, nothing will be the same. I was only 19 when I married Chris Kessler. He was 10 years older, already with a job at the power company and a Chevy truck that turned heads on dusty backroads. Folks in our little town of Mason Hollow, Georgia thought I'd hit the jackpot. A strong, steady man, they said. But the truth is, Chris didn't smile much when no one was looking. He had hands that worked hard and punished harder. The first time he hit me, it was over something so small I can't even remember what it was. A dish left in the sink, maybe. Or a dinner that cooled too fast. He didn't apologize. He just said, "Don't make me do that again." I should have left then. But I was young. Scared. And 6 weeks pregnant with Everett. People back then didn't talk about leaving. Especially not when there was a baby coming and the church ladies were already sewing the christening gown. So I stayed. When June came 2 years later, I thought maybe, just maybe, having a daughter would soften him. But Chris was a storm that never passed. Cold one moment, boiling the next. He never laid a hand on the kids. Not directly. But they saw everything. The way I flinched when he raised his voice. The way I avoided looking in mirrors because of the bruises on my cheek. He'd smash dishes, punch walls, curse until his voice cracked, and then walk away like nothing happened. The kids learned early. Stay quiet, stay invisible, and stay out of daddy's path. And I got good at hiding things. I learned how to smile at parent-teacher conferences. How to make excuses when neighbors asked about the noise. But the worst part wasn't the violence. It was the silence. The way he made us feel like we were nothing. And still I stayed. Because I told myself I was doing it for them. If I could just hold everything together, keep the house clean, keep his temper calm, keep breathing, then maybe Everett and June would grow up safe. Maybe they could still have a life, even if mine felt like it was ending one long, slow breath at a time. Then one rainy night something happened. Something that changed everything. But I'll get to that soon. Because before I broke my silence, I had to survive one last terrible secret. It was the fall of 1989. I remember because the leaves outside were the color of fire, reds and oranges that glowed through the windows like the house was lit from within. Everett was 10. June had just turned 12. That night, the rain came down hard. Like the sky was punishing the earth for something it did. Chris had come home late, reeking of whiskey and cheap cigars, muttering about how the world never gave him what he deserved. He slammed the door so hard it knocked a picture frame off the hallway wall. I remember the sound of glass shattering. I remember June's small feet padding down the stairs. "Mama, is Daddy okay?" I told her to go back to bed. She didn't. That night, I did what I always did, stood between him and them. But something was different. He wasn't just angry. He was seething. He said Everett had disrespected him earlier, refused to clean up the yard like he was told. "He's soft," Chris spat. "He needs to learn what a man is." He went to the hall closet. He grabbed his belt. He said, "Call the boy down." And for the first time in my life, I said no. I stood there, shaking, my heart racing, and told him, "You touch that child, and I swear to God, Chris, you'll regret it." The silence that followed was deafening. And then he laughed. A cold, bitter laugh I'll never forget. "You think you can threaten me, woman? You think you matter?" He raised the belt, not at Everett, but at me. And that's when it happened. From behind me, a voice. Small but clear. "June. Stop it, Daddy." She was holding Everett's hand. He was crying. She was not. She looked Chris straight in the eye and said again, louder this time, "Don't you touch her." Chris froze. And for the first time in 12 years he backed down. He dropped the belt. He didn't say a word. He walked out into the rain and didn't come back until the next morning, silent, ashamed. He never raised a hand again after that. But something broke that night. In him. In me. In us. It was also the night I made a choice. Promise. I would protect my children from the truth. I would let them remember that moment as a victory. Not as the night they almost lost their mother. Not as the night their father, the man they would one day bury with flowers, was prepared to hurt them. So I swallowed the memory. I buried it deep. And for the next 30 years I kept the secret that nearly destroyed me. But secrets, you see, don't stay buried. Especially not the ones wrapped in fear and love. The years that followed were a quiet kind of war. Not loud like that night, not bloody or obvious, but silent. Worn like an old coat I couldn't take off. I smiled at PTA meetings. I packed school lunches. I kissed bruised knees and clapped at graduations. I even laughed. God, I laughed, sometimes so hard it hurt. But beneath it all, I was just surviving. Chris changed after that night. Not for the better, not really for the worse. Just numb. He drank less, spoke less, slept more. He worked his job at the lumberyard and kept his distance. He didn't hit me again, and that was something. But his silence was its own punishment. He became a ghost in his own home. The kids never noticed. Or maybe they did, but they learned to pretend like I did. Everett threw himself into sports, football, baseball, even wrestling. Anything physical that let him feel strong. June turned inward. Books, writing, music. Her room became a cave of soft things and deep thoughts. I supported them. Every recital. Every game. Every tear. And I never spoke a word about what happened. Not to them. Not to my sister. Not to God. Chris died in 2003. A heart attack. Quick, clean. He was only 58. At his funeral, June stood beside his casket and whispered, "You were a complicated man, Daddy, but I loved you." Everett cried so hard he shook. I held my breath the entire time. I was mourning too. But not the man. I was mourning the parts of me I'd lost trying to protect the memory of him. The part of me that was loud. That danced. That laughed with her whole body. That trusted. That spoke. That was the cost of silence. And even then I still couldn't say it. I looked at my children, so kind, so accomplished, so full of life, and I thought, if they knew what he really was, would they still be proud of me? So I swallowed the truth. Again. Even as it sat in my chest like a stone. But stones don't disappear. They grow heavier with time. And 30 years later, I felt the weight become unbearable. It started with Everett's son. My grandson, Miles. One day he came to visit me at the nursing home. Sweet boy. Sensitive. And he said, "Grandma, is it okay if I tell you something that might make you sad?" I told him, "Honey, at my age, sad stories are just part of the scrapbook." And then he told me, his father Everett had hit him. Not often. But once was enough. He said it only happened when Everett lost his temper. When he was drinking. He apologized after. Miles added. But I'm scared it might happen again. And just like that, the stone in my chest cracked. My silence wasn't protection anymore. It was a weapon, passed down. And if I didn't stop it now, it would live in my grandchildren. That was the day I decided to speak. The next morning, I sat at the little round table by the window in my room at Willow Creek Senior Living. The sky was gray, spitting slow, cold rain. I watched droplets trace down the glass like tears that never asked permission. I held a photo in my hand, one of Everett at age 6. Gap-toothed grin, baseball glove too big for his hand, eyes full of light I'd spent my life protecting. And now he'd used that same hand to strike his son. I felt the world tilt beneath me. That night came back like it was yesterday. Chris's breath hot on my face. His voice sharp like broken glass. Everett crying behind me. My hand trembling with the phone. No police.
No scandal.
No broken home. Just silence. But silence had bloomed into something poisonous. I had made a mistake, believing silence was protection. Now I had to unmake it. Somehow. I called June first. She picked up on the second ring.
Mama.
Everything okay? Her voice was cheerful, light. She was always the easy talker. I need to see you. Both of you. Together, I said. My voice shook, but I tried to sound firm. She hesitated. Is it serious? Yes, I said. 30 years serious. We agreed on Sunday. Family lunch. Neutral ground, June's house in Edge Hollow. She offered to cook. Everett will bring Miles too. You like that? I said nothing, because I didn't know what I was about to do. The days before Sunday felt like marching to a war I wasn't sure I'd survive. I wrote down everything. My memory. That night. The silence. The years after. I had to organize my pain before I spilled it. I read it back to myself aloud. The words sounded like someone else's life. But it was mine. Sunday came. The smell of rosemary chicken filled June's kitchen. Laughter. Chatter. The clink of glasses. If someone had walked in, they'd think we were the perfect family. Everett hugged me gently. Hey Ma, you look good. Thank you, son, I said. Miles peeked out from behind him. I saw the shadow in his eyes. I wanted to scoop him into my arms and say, it's not your fault. But first, I had to break the thing I built. When we all sat down at the table, I cleared my throat. My fingers trembled as I set my napkin aside. There's something I need to say. They turned toward me. I felt 30 years of pain rise like a storm behind my ribs. Everett, when you were 6, your father hit me. Badly. You saw it. His face froze. His fork slipped from his hand. June's eyes widened. I never told anyone. I continued. Not the police. Not even you. I thought I was protecting you. But that silence. I turned to Miles. That silence hurt more than I ever imagined. Because now it's happening again. The room dropped into stunned silence. Everett's face was pale. Mom, I don't remember that. I don't. June clapped a hand over her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. And Miles, sweet boy, just looked at me like I had cracked the world open. I took a breath. I stayed silent for 30 years. I won't do it anymore. The silence after my confession wasn't the quiet kind. It was loud, thundering inside the room like a train coming off its tracks. Everett stood up from the table, his chair screeching backward. He looked stunned, like I had struck him across the face. What are you saying, Mom? That I'm like him. His voice cracked. I didn't answer right away. My hands were folded tightly in my lap, knuckles white. I didn't want to attack. I wanted him to hear me. Really hear me. I'm saying pain doesn't disappear, Everett. It hides. And it grows in silence. June put a hand over her chest. Her voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you ever tell us? I looked at my daughter, so full of warmth and reason. She had always been the peacekeeper. I wanted you both to believe we had a good life. And in many ways we did. But I buried the worst of it under good birthdays and summer barbecues. My eyes flicked back to Everett. His jaw was clenched. And now, I said gently, Miles is the one burying things. Everett shook his head. You don't know what it's like raising a boy now. He's emotional. Sensitive. Sometimes I just lose control. I said. He stared at me, his eyes glistening, but no tears came. I swore I'd never be like him, he whispered. I know, I said. I believe that. But breaking the cycle takes more than swearing. It takes truth. It takes work. He looked down and for a moment he was 6 again, standing in the doorway watching his mother bruise. June stepped in. Everett, I've seen it too, she said quietly. How short your temper gets. Miles flinches sometimes. I just thought you were tired. I didn't mean to, he said, voice raw. I didn't think it was that bad. You never do, I said. Until someone breaks the silence. Miles sat on the carpet, pretending to play with his action figures. But I saw the way his little shoulders tensed. I knelt down beside him. My knees cracked loudly, but I didn't care. Miles, sweetheart, look at Grandma. He looked up. None of this is your fault. Grown-ups make mistakes. But they have to fix them. His eyes, big and brown like Everett's once were, blinked at me. Will Daddy fix it? I looked up at my son. That's up to him. The rest of the afternoon passed like a fog. June packed leftovers into foil. Everett paced outside, smoking a cigarette he hadn't touched in 10 years. No one said it, but the silence between us had changed. I had broken mine. Now it was their turn. That night, back in my room at Willow Creek, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan turning in slow, creaky circles. I had done it. 30 years of silence, gone in a single afternoon. But what came next? Would Everett face what he'd done? Would Miles be free of the weight? Would my truth heal us, or rip us apart? The next morning, I woke to the soft knock of a nurse, and the quiet hum of the hallway at Willow Creek. But I wasn't in the mood for small talk or oatmeal. My mind was still wrapped around yesterday, like an old wound freshly torn open. I sat with my tea by the window. The autumn trees swayed, their leaves falling, like little truths finally letting go. I thought Everett wouldn't call. Not after what I said. But just after noon the phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I held my breath before answering. Hey Mom, he said, his voice low, unfamiliar. There was a long pause, filled with all the words he didn't know how to say. I talked to Miles last night, he finally said. Really talked. I could feel my heart beating like it used to when he was a teenager. Every time he stayed out too late or got in trouble at school. And I asked gently. Everett exhaled. He asked me if I was angry at him, if I hit him because he's bad. Tears welled in my eyes. Oh baby. I told him it's not his fault, that I'm the one who needs to do better. I could hear the crack in his voice now, the fear, the shame, the tiny bit of hope. He told me he was starting therapy, that June had found someone who worked with men dealing with inherited trauma. I never thought I'd hear those words from my son. I want to be better than him, Mom, he said. Not just different, better. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever said to me. That night, I pulled out an old photo from my drawer. Me young and beaming, holding baby Everett on the porch of our little blue house. He had no idea what world he was born into. No idea what it would cost him just to grow up. I had tried my best to shield him, but silence had its price too. Now at last I saw my son trying to lay it all down, to stop carrying what wasn't his to bear. Later that week, June visited me alone. We sat in the courtyard sipping coffee as the wind picked up. I'm proud of you, Mom, she said, for telling the truth. It hurt, but it helped too. I reached out and squeezed her hand. I didn't want to take the secret to my grave. It would have buried all of us. She nodded, eyes shining. I know Dad wasn't perfect, she said, but I didn't know what you went through. I looked into my daughter's face, so kind, so steady, and felt the ache of every year I stayed quiet. It's not too late, I whispered, to heal what's broken. We sat there for a while, just two women carrying the weight of generations. But this time we weren't carrying it alone. I had tucked it away nearly 3 decades ago, a letter I never sent. It was written in a shaky hand, on yellowed paper with edges soft from being folded too many times. I'd kept it in a wooden keepsake box under my bed, the one carved by my grandfather before the Depression. I never showed it to anyone. Not Everett. Not June. Not even Chris when he was alive. But that morning something shifted. Maybe it was Everett's voice on the phone. Maybe it was June's hand in mine. Or maybe it was just time. I opened the box slowly like I was opening an old wound. The letter lay between baby photos and a faded hospital bracelet that read Everett, male 6 pounds, 8 ounces. I sat down at my desk and unfolded the letter. It began, Dear Everett. I had written it on the night I left his father. I remember crying at the kitchen table after I'd put Everett and June to sleep. I tried to make the words neat, but the tears blurred the ink. I never mailed it. Never gave it to him when he was old enough. I convinced myself it was better he didn't know. But now I knew he needed it. I called June and asked her to come by. She arrived an hour later, wearing that deep green coat that reminded me of her first day of college. What is it? She asked, sitting beside me. I handed her the letter. Take this to Everett, I said softly. He deserves to read it now. She looked confused but nodded. As she read the first few lines, her expression changed. Her eyebrows drew together, and her lips parted in a silent gasp. Mom, she whispered. You were going to take us and disappear? I nodded. I almost did. But Chris found the backs. He begged me to stay. Said he'd change. And I was scared. I had no job, 2 kids, and no help. June's eyes filled with tears. You stayed for us. I stayed, I said. Because I thought protecting you meant hiding everything. I was wrong. The next day, Everett showed up. Unannounced. He had the letter in his hand. He walked into my room at Willow Creek, knelt beside my chair and held my hand like a child again. I read it, he said. All of it. I couldn't speak. I get it now, he whispered. I understand why you stayed. And why you didn't tell me until now. I felt hot tears on my cheeks. Everett kissed my forehead. I'm not angry anymore, Mom. I just want to make things right. For the first time in 30 years, I felt the air shift. The past was still there, but it wasn't holding us hostage anymore. Forgiveness doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly, like the morning sun slipping through half-closed blinds. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed at Willow Creek, the letter now folded gently inside my nightstand. The same paper that once trembled with fear now rested as a symbol of release. Everett had forgiven me, but what stayed with me most was the way he looked at me. Not as someone who kept a secret, but as a woman who had carried too much for too long. The next morning, June returned with muffins from my favorite bakery. Lemon poppy seed, the kind I used to pack in her lunchbox when she was in 5th grade. We sat in the garden. It was quiet except for birds hopping along the stone path, and the distant hum of a sprinkler. You were never weak, Mama, she said, sipping her tea. You were brave in a way I didn't understand until now. Her words loosened something in me. Something that had been clenched since 1989. We talked for hours about Chris, the choices I made, the silence I kept. June shared memories I hadn't known she held. The time she overheard Chris yelling and hid under her blanket. How she always wondered why I never raised my voice even when angry. I thought I protected them from it all. But kids always feel more than we think they do. I carried pieces of it, she admitted. But I never blamed you. I just wanted to know you. I looked at my daughter, grown now, strong and smart, and I realized that she did know me now. For the first time, truly. That afternoon, Everett came by again. He brought his teenage daughter, Nora. She had her father's quiet nature, but her eyes, sharp and observant, were mine. We sat on the porch, Nora scrolling through photos on her phone as Everett watched me. There's a strength in telling the truth, he said suddenly. Even when it hurts. Especially then. I nodded. I spent years building a version of our family in my mind, he said. Perfect. Clean. Safe. But real love doesn't need perfect, does it? No, I said softly. Real love just needs truth and time. For the first time in 30 years, I let go of shame. I didn't need to wear it like armor anymore. My children knew the truth. And they chose to stay. That, I think, is what forgiveness feels like. Not loud. Not grand. Just quiet peace. It was a Sunday. The kind of golden, breezy autumn Sunday where the leaves fall like blessings. I never thought my life would have another beginning, but it did. And it started at my kitchen table, with mismatched chairs and a roast chicken that was a little too dry, but made with my own hands. Everett brought a bottle of wine. June arrived with her husband and her youngest, Hazel. She ran to me and said, "Grandma, your porch smells like cinnamon." I smiled. It wasn't the cinnamon. It was freedom. After dinner, I stood up. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear this time. From release. "There's one last thing I need to say," I told them. "Not to protect you anymore, but to honor myself." Everyone grew quiet. I looked at June. At Everett. At Hazel with her tangled hair and grape juice mustache. "I thought silence was love," I said. "But silence is just a slow poison. It eats the parts of you that are real." I paused. For 30 years, I kept the secret because I was afraid it would break us. But the truth, it's what rebuilt us. Tears slid silently down Everett's face. June reached over and held his hand. In that moment, I didn't see my children. I saw my survival in them. They had become stronger than the weight of our past. I reached for Hazel's hand. She climbed onto my lap without hesitation. "You're not too late, Mama," June whispered. "You didn't miss the ending. You just gave us a better one." That night, I sat by the window, wrapped in a quilt June had made for me years ago. I sipped tea and stared at the moon, full, round, like a heart finally unclenched. I didn't need a grand reckoning. I just needed that dinner. That moment. That truth, spoken out loud after so long buried. I used to think I was dying with a secret. But I didn't die. I lived, finally fully. And this time, with nothing left to hide. The silence is broken. And in its place is peace.